My name is Lisa, and I'm 41 years old. I'm the mother of 3 children: Sophie, who is 14, Jake, who is 12, and Emma, who is 9. Until 1 year ago, I thought my husband Michael and I were building a secure financial future for our family. We owned a beautiful home, had college savings accounts for our children, and seemed to be living the American dream of middle-class prosperity. Today, I'm a single mother living in a small apartment, working 2 jobs to support my children, and trying to rebuild our lives after discovering that Michael had secretly spent over $200,000 of our family's money on his mistress over the course of 3 years. This is the story of how financial betrayal destroyed not just my marriage, but my children's security and our family's future. Michael and I met 15 years ago when we were both working at the same marketing firm. He was ambitious, charming, and seemed to have a bright future ahead of him. We fell in love quickly and married after 2 years of dating. Michael was everything I had wanted in a partner. He was hardworking, family-oriented, and committed to building a successful life together. During the early years of our marriage, Michael's career progressed steadily, and our financial situation improved consistently. He received regular promotions and salary increases, and we were able to buy our first home, start a family, and begin building the kind of financial security that would allow us to provide for our children's education and our own retirement. Michael was always the primary breadwinner in our family, earning significantly more than I did in my part-time marketing position. We had agreed that I would reduce my work hours after Sophie was born so that I could be more available for our children, and Michael's income was sufficient to support our family comfortably while allowing us to save for the future. Our financial management system seemed solid and responsible. Michael handled the major financial decisions and long-term planning, while I managed the household budget and day-to-day expenses. We had joint checking and savings accounts, and Michael would transfer money to our household account each month to cover our living expenses. Michael was always generous with our family spending and never seemed concerned about money. He would encourage me to buy things for the children and the house, and he would often surprise us with gifts, family vacations, and special experiences. I thought his generosity was evidence of our financial success and his commitment to providing well for his family. The first signs that something might be wrong with our finances came about 2 years ago when Michael began to seem more stressed about work and more secretive about our financial situation. He would receive phone calls that he would take in private, and he would sometimes spend hours working on financial documents and computer spreadsheets that he wouldn't discuss with me. When I asked Michael about his increased stress and secretiveness, he explained that his job had become more demanding and that he was dealing with complex client situations that required confidentiality. He said that the financial work he was doing at home was related to investment planning and business development that would ultimately benefit our family. Michael's explanations seemed reasonable, and I was grateful that he was working so hard to secure our financial future. I trusted his financial judgment completely and was happy to let him handle the complex aspects of our money management while I focused on our children and household responsibilities. Around the same time, Michael began traveling more frequently for work, often taking trips that lasted several days and required him to be out of communication for extended periods. He would explain that these trips were necessary for client development and business expansion, and that the travel was temporary but important for his career advancement. Michael would return from these business trips with gifts for the children and stories about successful meetings and new business opportunities. He seemed energized and optimistic about his work, and I was proud of his dedication and success. The increased travel seemed like a natural result of his growing importance in his company. The financial stress in our household began to become apparent about 18 months ago when Michael started asking me to be more careful about household spending. He would review our monthly expenses and express concern about costs that had never been problems before: grocery bills, utility payments, and children's activities that we had always been able to afford easily. When I asked Michael about the changes in our financial situation, he explained that his company was going through a difficult period and that his income had been temporarily reduced. He said that we needed to be more conservative with our spending until his work situation stabilized and his income returned to its previous level. Michael's explanation made sense given the economic climate and the challenges that many businesses were facing. I was understanding and supportive of the need to reduce our expenses, and I began looking for ways to cut costs and stretch our household budget further. I started shopping at discount stores, buying generic brands, and looking for sales and coupons to reduce our grocery and household expenses. I postponed purchases for the children and the house that weren't absolutely necessary, and I began declining social activities that involved spending money. The children began to notice the changes in our spending patterns and would ask why we couldn't afford things that we had always been able to buy before. I would explain that Daddy's work was going through a difficult time and that we needed to be careful with money until things improved. Sophie, Jake, and Emma were understanding and cooperative about the financial restrictions, but I could see that they were confused and worried about our family situation. They began to ask questions about whether we would be able to afford their school activities, their summer camps, and their college educations. The financial pressure continued to increase over the following months as Michael's requests for reduced spending became more urgent and specific. He would review our bank statements and question every expense, often criticizing purchases that seemed reasonable and necessary to me. Michael began to seem angry and frustrated about money in ways that were unlike his previous attitude toward our finances. He would make comments about how expensive our family was and how difficult it was to support all of our needs and wants. He would suggest that I needed to find ways to contribute more income to our household budget. The suggestion that I should increase my work hours was problematic because our children still needed supervision and support, and childcare costs would offset much of any additional income one could earn. Michael's criticism of our family expenses and his pressure for me to work more made me feel like I was failing to contribute adequately to our financial stability. I began working additional freelance projects and looking for ways to increase my income while still being available for our children's needs. The additional work was stressful and exhausting, but I felt responsible for helping to address our family's financial challenges. The breaking point came last spring when our mortgage payment was returned for insufficient funds. I had never experienced a bounced payment in our entire marriage, and the bank's notice was shocking and embarrassing. When I called Michael to ask about the problem, he seemed as surprised as I was and promised to resolve the issue immediately. Michael explained that there had been a timing problem with his paycheck deposit and that the mortgage payment had been processed before his salary had been transferred to our account. He said that he would contact the bank and resolve the situation, and that this type of problem wouldn't happen again. But the financial problems continued to escalate over the following weeks. Credit card payments were missed, utility bills were paid late, and our savings account balance began to decrease rapidly. When I asked Michael about these ongoing problems, he became defensive and angry, accusing me of not trusting him to handle our finances properly. Michael's attitude toward money became increasingly erratic and concerning. He would sometimes seem panicked about our expenses and would demand that I reduce our spending even further. Other times, he would seem unconcerned about money and would make purchases or plan activities that seemed inconsistent with our supposed financial difficulties. The inconsistency in Michael's behavior and explanations about our financial situation began to make me suspicious that there was something he wasn't telling me about our money problems. I started paying closer attention to our bank statements and financial documents, trying to understand what was causing our sudden financial instability. What I discovered when I began investigating our finances was shocking and devastating. Michael had been systematically draining our family's accounts for over 3 years, transferring large amounts of money to accounts and purposes that I knew nothing about. The bank statements showed regular transfers of thousands of dollars to accounts that I didn't recognize. There were credit card charges for expensive restaurants, luxury hotels, jewelry stores, and high-end retail establishments that we had never visited as a family. There were cash withdrawals in amounts that far exceeded any reasonable household expenses. The pattern of spending that I discovered was clearly not related to business expenses or family needs. The amounts were too large, the vendors were too luxury-oriented, and the frequency was too regular to be explained by legitimate work or household requirements. When I confronted Michael with the evidence of these unexplained expenses, he initially tried to claim that they were all business-related and that he had been reimbursed by his company for most of the charges. But when I pressed him for documentation and details, his explanations began to fall apart. Michael eventually admitted that he had been having an affair for over 3 years and that he had been spending money on his mistress during that entire period. The woman's name was Victoria, and she was a 28-year-old marketing coordinator who worked for one of Michael's clients. The financial details of Michael's affair were staggering and devastating. He had been giving Victoria expensive gifts on a regular basis. Jewelry, designer clothes, electronics, and luxury items that cost thousands of dollars each. He had been taking her on elaborate vacations to expensive resorts and destinations that we could never afford as a family. Michael had rented an apartment for Victoria in an upscale neighborhood, paying her rent and utilities for over 2 years. He had been covering her car payments, insurance, and maintenance costs. He had even been paying for her graduate school tuition and living expenses while she pursued an advanced degree. The total amount that Michael had spent on Victoria and their affair was over $200,000, money that had come from our family savings accounts, college funds, retirement investments, and even loans that he had taken out using our home as collateral. The realization that my children's college funds had been spent on Michael's mistress was devastating. Sophie, Jake, and Emma had been looking forward to attending college and had been working hard in school to earn scholarships and prepare for their futures. The money that was supposed to secure their educational opportunities had been spent on luxury gifts and experiences for a woman they didn't even know existed. Our retirement savings had also been completely depleted. The money that Michael and I had been contributing for over 15 years, money that was supposed to provide security for our old age, had been spent on supporting Michael's affair. Our future financial security had been sacrificed for his immediate gratification and his desire to impress his mistress. The home equity loans that Michael had taken out without my knowledge had put our family home at risk of foreclosure. He had borrowed against our house to fund his affair, creating debt that we couldn't afford to repay on our reduced income. The home that was supposed to provide stability for our children was now in jeopardy because of Michael's financial betrayal. The credit card debt that Michael had accumulated was enormous and overwhelming. He had opened multiple credit accounts that I didn't know about and had maxed them out purchasing gifts and experiences for Victoria. The monthly payments on these credit cards were more than our entire household budget, making it impossible for us to maintain our standard of living. The discovery of the full scope of Michael's financial betrayal was a process that took weeks as I worked with accountants and lawyers to trace where our money had gone and what debts we were responsible for. Each new revelation was more shocking and devastating than the last. Michael had been forging my signature on financial documents, opening accounts in both of our names without my knowledge, and using my personal information to secure loans and credit that I had never agreed to. The financial fraud he had committed against our family was extensive and had serious legal implications. The impact on our children was immediate and heartbreaking. Sophie, Jake, and Emma had to be told that we could no longer afford many of the activities and opportunities that they had been counting on. Summer camps were canceled, music lessons were discontinued, and college planning conversations became discussions about financial aid and student loans rather than educational opportunities. The children were confused and frightened by the sudden changes in our financial situation. They couldn't understand how we had gone from being financially comfortable to struggling to pay basic bills almost overnight. The stress and uncertainty affected their school performance, their social relationships, and their emotional well-being. Sophie, as the oldest, understood more about the financial implications of Michael's betrayal and was angry about the impact on her college plans. She had been working hard to maintain good grades and participate in extracurricular activities that would help her earn scholarships, but the loss of her college fund meant that her educational options were now severely limited. Jake was confused about why his father had chosen to spend money on a stranger rather than on his own family's needs and future. He couldn't understand how someone who claimed to love his children could make choices that put their security and opportunities at risk. Emma was too young to fully understand the financial implications, but she could sense the stress and tension in our household and was affected by the changes in our lifestyle and family dynamics. She would ask why we couldn't afford things that we had always been able to buy before, and why Daddy didn't live with us anymore. The legal process of divorcing Michael was complicated by the extensive financial fraud he had committed and the need to protect our family's remaining assets from further depletion. My lawyer had to work with forensic accountants to trace all of the money that Michael had spent on his affair and to identify which debts were legitimately ours versus which had been incurred through his fraud. The bankruptcy proceedings that became necessary to address Michael's debt were humiliating and devastating. Our family home had to be sold to pay off the loans and credit card debt that Michael had accumulated. Our credit ratings were destroyed, making it difficult to secure housing, employment, or financial services in the future. The impact on our community reputation was significant as news of Michael's financial betrayal and our family's bankruptcy became public knowledge. Neighbors, friends, and community members who had respected us as a successful family now viewed us with pity and suspicion. The children's school friends and their families were aware of our changed circumstances, which affected the children's social relationships and self-esteem. Sophie, Jake, and Emma were embarrassed about our financial situation and worried about how their friends and teachers perceived our family. The career impact was substantial as I had to dramatically increase my work hours and take on additional employment to support our family. The stress of working multiple jobs while managing the children's needs and the legal proceedings was overwhelming and exhausting. The emotional impact of Michael's financial betrayal was as devastating as the practical consequences. The realization that he had prioritized his mistress's comfort and luxury over his own children's basic needs and future opportunities was heartbreaking and infuriating. Michael had been spending more money on Victoria's monthly rent than we spent on our children's food and clothing combined. He had bought her a car that cost more than our annual household budget. He had taken her on vacations that cost more than our children's entire education fund. The priorities that Michael's spending revealed were cruel and shocking. While our children were wearing hand-me-down clothes and eating generic brand food to save money, Victoria was receiving designer outfits and dining at expensive restaurants. While we were postponing home repairs and maintenance to reduce expenses, Michael was paying for Victoria's luxury apartment and lifestyle. The therapy process that became necessary to help our family cope with the trauma of Michael's betrayal was expensive and difficult to afford given our destroyed financial situation. The children needed counseling to process their father's abandonment and the loss of their financial security, but therapy costs were a significant burden on our already strained budget. The legal fees associated with the divorce and bankruptcy proceedings were enormous and created additional financial stress during an already difficult time. The cost of protecting our family's interests and securing our future was money that we didn't have and couldn't afford to spend. The housing instability that resulted from losing our family home was particularly traumatic for the children. They had to leave the bedrooms they had grown up in, the neighborhood they had known all their lives, and the school district where they had established friendships and academic records. The apartment we moved to was significantly smaller and less comfortable than our family home. The children had to share bedrooms and give up many of their possessions because we couldn't afford to move everything and didn't have space for all of our belongings. The school transitions were difficult for all three children as they had to adjust to new schools, new teachers, and new social environments while processing the trauma of their parents' divorce and their family's financial collapse. Their academic performance suffered as they struggled to adapt to multiple major changes simultaneously. The social stigma associated with bankruptcy and financial failure affected our family's relationships with friends and community members. People who had been close to us during our prosperous years became distant and uncomfortable when our circumstances changed dramatically. The children lost friendships and social opportunities because we could no longer afford to participate in activities and events that had been important parts of their social lives. Birthday parties, sports teams, and social clubs became luxuries that we couldn't afford rather than normal parts of childhood. The investigation into Michael's financial betrayal revealed the extent to which he had been deceiving not just me, but also financial institutions, employers, and other family members. He had been lying about his income, his expenses, and his financial obligations to maintain his affair while hiding the true state of our family's finances. Michael had been using business credit cards for personal expenses related to his affair, creating liability for his employer and potentially jeopardizing his professional reputation and career. The mixing of business and personal expenses for affair-related activities was both unethical and potentially illegal. The insurance policies that Michael had cashed out or borrowed against were supposed to provide financial security for our family in case of emergency or death. The money from these policies had been spent on Victoria's lifestyle and their affair activities, leaving our family without the protection and security that these policies were meant to provide. The investment accounts that Michael had liquidated were supposed to fund our children's college educations and our retirement. The early withdrawal penalties and tax consequences of cashing out these investments created additional financial burdens while eliminating the long-term financial security they were meant to provide. The timeline of Michael's financial betrayal corresponded exactly with the timeline of his affair with Victoria. The spending had started small with occasional expensive dinners and gifts, but had escalated dramatically as their relationship became more serious and Victoria's expectations increased. Victoria had apparently become accustomed to a lifestyle that Michael was funding entirely with our family's money. She had expensive tastes in clothing, jewelry, travel, and entertainment, and Michael had been eager to provide whatever she wanted regardless of the cost to our family's financial security. The apartment that Michael had rented for Victoria was in one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the city, with rent that exceeded our entire monthly household budget. The furniture and decorating that he had paid for in that apartment was more luxurious than anything we had in our own family home. The car that Michael had bought for Victoria was a luxury vehicle that cost more than we had ever spent on a family car. While our children were riding in a used minivan that needed repairs we couldn't afford, Victoria was driving a brand new luxury sedan that Michael had purchased for her with our family's money. The vacations that Michael had taken with Victoria were elaborate and expensive trips to exotic destinations that we had never been able to afford as a family. While our children had been asking for family vacations that we couldn't afford, Michael had been taking his mistress on luxury trips to Europe, the Caribbean, and exclusive resorts. The jewelry and designer clothing that Michael had bought for Victoria represented thousands of dollars that could have been used for our children's education, medical care, or family experiences. The priority he had given to Victoria's material desires over his own children's needs was cruel and incomprehensible. The restaurants and entertainment expenses that Michael had incurred during his affair were excessive and ongoing. He had been spending hundreds of dollars on single meals with Victoria, while our family was eating budget meals and generic groceries to save money. The financial planning that Michael and I had done together during the affair had been based on completely false information about our actual financial situation. While I thought we were building wealth and security for our family's future, Michael was actually depleting our resources and creating massive debt to fund his affair. The college planning conversations that we had with our children during the affair were particularly cruel in retrospect. Michael had been encouraging Sophie, Jake, and Emma to dream about their educational futures and to work hard in school to prepare for college, while simultaneously spending their college funds on his mistress. The retirement planning discussions that Michael and I had during the affair were similarly false and manipulative. Michael had been talking about our financial goals and our plans for the future while actually destroying our ability to achieve any of those goals through his affair spending. The insurance and financial protection planning that we had done as a responsible family was undermined by Michael's secret borrowing and policy liquidation. The financial safety net that we thought we had built for our family's protection had been eliminated to fund Michael's affair. The home improvement and maintenance planning that we had discussed as a family was affected by Michael's affair spending. Projects that would have improved our family's living situation and protected our home's value were postponed or canceled because the money had been spent on Victoria instead. The children's extracurricular activities and educational opportunities were gradually eliminated as our financial situation deteriorated. Music lessons, sports teams, art classes, and academic programs that had been important parts of their development became unaffordable luxuries. The family traditions and celebrations that had been important to our children were scaled back or eliminated because of our financial constraints. Birthday parties became smaller and less elaborate. Holiday gifts became fewer and less expensive, and family outings became rare and carefully budgeted. The stress of managing our deteriorating financial situation while trying to maintain normalcy for our children was overwhelming and exhausting. I was constantly worried about money, constantly looking for ways to reduce expenses, and constantly making difficult choices about what our family could and couldn't afford. The discovery of Michael's affair through our financial crisis was particularly devastating because it revealed that our family's suffering had been caused by his selfish choices rather than by economic circumstances beyond our control. Learning that our children had been deprived of opportunities and experiences so that Michael could fund his affair was heartbreaking and infuriating. The confrontation with Michael about his financial betrayal was unlike anything I had ever experienced. When presented with evidence of his affair spending, he initially tried to minimize the amounts and claim that the expenses had been exaggerated or misunderstood. But the financial records were undeniable and extensive. Bank statements, credit card bills, loan documents, and receipts created a clear picture of years of systematic financial betrayal that had destroyed our family's economic security. Michael's justifications for his financial betrayal were as painful as the betrayal itself. He claimed that he had never intended for the spending to get so out of control, and that he had been planning to find ways to repay the money before I discovered what he had been doing. Michael seemed to believe that his intentions to eventually address the financial damage somehow excused the years of theft and deception that had preceded his forced confession. He couldn't understand that the financial harm to our family was just as serious as the emotional harm of his affair. The impact of Michael's financial betrayal on our children's futures was permanent and irreversible. The college funds that had been depleted couldn't be rebuilt in time for Sophie's graduation, and the retirement savings that had been spent couldn't be recovered before Michael and I reached old age. The credit damage and bankruptcy that resulted from Michael's affair spending would affect our family's ability to secure housing, employment, and financial services for years to come. The consequences of his financial betrayal would continue to impact our lives long after the divorce was finalized. The emotional trauma of learning that Michael had prioritized his mistress's comfort over his own children's welfare was devastating and lasting. The children struggled to understand how their father could have made choices that put their security and opportunities at risk for the sake of impressing another woman. The recovery process from financial betrayal has been long and challenging. Rebuilding our family's financial stability from nothing while supporting 3 children as a single mother has required enormous effort and sacrifice. I've had to develop new skills in financial management, debt recovery, and budget planning that I never expected to need. The process of rebuilding credit, securing affordable housing, and managing multiple income sources has been a steep learning curve during an emotionally difficult time. The children have had to adjust to a dramatically different lifestyle and learn to find happiness and fulfillment in experiences and relationships rather than material possessions. The lessons they've learned about resilience and adaptability have been valuable, but shouldn't have been necessary. The support systems that helped our family survive this financial and emotional crisis have been invaluable. Community organizations, religious groups, and charitable programs provided assistance that helped us meet basic needs during the most difficult periods. The legal aid services that helped me navigate the divorce and bankruptcy proceedings were essential for protecting our family's interests and ensuring that Michael was held accountable for his financial crimes against our family. The counseling and therapy services that helped our children process their father's betrayal and our family's changed circumstances were crucial for their emotional well-being and adjustment to our new reality. The employment assistance and career development programs that helped me increase my earning capacity were important for our long-term financial recovery and stability. The housing assistance programs that helped us secure affordable accommodation were essential for maintaining our family's stability during the transition period after losing our home. The lessons I've learned about financial protection and independence have been valuable but expensive. I now understand the importance of maintaining awareness and control over family finances, even in marriages where one partner takes primary responsibility for money management. The warning signs that I missed during Michael's affair are things that I now recognize as red flags that should be taken seriously. Unexplained changes in spending patterns, secretiveness about financial documents, and inconsistencies in explanations about money problems are all potential indicators of financial infidelity. The importance of maintaining some financial independence and verification methods in marriage has become clear through this experience. While complete financial transparency isn't always necessary or practical, spouses should have access to information about major financial decisions and should be aware of the family's overall financial situation. The recovery journey continues, but I've learned that rebuilding is possible even after the most devastating financial betrayal. The support of genuine friends, professional assistance, and determination have helped our family begin to create a new and more secure future. For other women who might be experiencing unexplained financial difficulties or suspicious changes in their family's money situation, I want you to know that financial infidelity is real and serious, and that you have the right to understand and control your family's financial situation. Trust your instincts when something doesn't feel right about your family's finances, and don't hesitate to investigate when explanations don't make sense or when financial problems seem inconsistent with your family's income and expenses. Protect yourself and your children by maintaining awareness of your family's financial situation and by ensuring that you have access to important financial documents and account information. Financial betrayal can be just as devastating as emotional betrayal, and it can have lasting consequences that affect your family for years. You deserve financial honesty and security in your marriage, and you deserve to have your family's resources used for your family's benefit rather than for funding someone else's lifestyle and relationship. Don't let anyone convince you that you don't have the right to understand and control your own financial situation. The healing journey continues, but I've learned that recovery is possible even from the most devastating financial and emotional betrayal. The support of genuine friends, professional therapy, and time have helped me rebuild my life and my ability to trust others while protecting myself and my children from future deception. Let me share more specific details about how Michael's financial betrayal unfolded over the 3 years of his affair, because understanding the progression of financial infidelity might help other women recognize similar patterns in their own marriages before the damage becomes irreversible. The early stages of Michael's affair spending were subtle and easily explained away as normal business or personal expenses. He would occasionally charge expensive dinners to our credit cards, claiming that he had been entertaining clients or celebrating work achievements. These charges were typically a few $100s and seemed reasonable given his professional responsibilities. Michael also began buying more expensive personal items for himself, designer shirts, expensive shoes, luxury grooming products, claiming that his professional image was important for his career advancement. These purchases seemed like reasonable investments in his professional success, and I was supportive of his efforts to present himself well in business situations. The gift purchases that Michael made during the early stages of his affair were disguised as presents for family members or business associates. He would buy expensive jewelry or luxury items, claiming that they were anniversary gifts for me that he was storing until the appropriate occasion, or business gifts for important clients. When these supposed gifts for me never materialized, or when the business gifts seemed excessive for professional relationships, Michael would have explanations ready about change plans or different gift-giving strategies. I trusted his judgment about business relationships and didn't question his spending on what seemed like legitimate professional expenses. The travel expenses that Michael began incurring were initially explained as necessary business trips that required higher-end accommodations and transportation than his company's standard travel policy covered. He would claim that important clients expected certain standards of accommodation and that investing in better hotels and restaurants was necessary for securing business relationships. Michael would often extend these supposed business trips by a day or two, claiming that additional meetings had been scheduled or that travel delays required longer stays. The extra expenses associated with these extended trips seemed like unavoidable business costs rather than personal indulgences. The cash withdrawals that Michael began making regularly were explained as necessary for business, entertainment, and client relationship activities that required cash payments. He would claim that certain business dinners and entertainment activities were better handled with cash to avoid creating complicated expense reports. The amounts of these cash withdrawals gradually increased over time, starting with a few $100s per month and eventually reaching several $1,000s per month. Michael always had explanations for why the cash was necessary and where it was being spent, but I now realize that this cash was being used to fund his affair activities. The credit card applications that Michael began submitting were presented as opportunities to improve our credit scores and take advantage of rewards programs that would benefit our family. He would explain that having multiple cards with different benefits would allow us to maximize our purchasing power and earn rewards for family activities. Michael would handle all of the paperwork and communication related to these credit cards, claiming that managing multiple accounts was complicated and that he wanted to spare me the administrative burden. I was grateful for his willingness to handle these financial details and trusted that he was making decisions that would benefit our family. The investment changes that Michael began making to our portfolio were explained as necessary adjustments to market conditions and opportunities for better returns on our savings. He would talk about moving money between different types of accounts to take advantage of interest rates and investment opportunities. Michael would show me financial documents and investment statements that seemed to support his explanations about portfolio management and wealth building. I trusted his financial expertise and was impressed by his attention to our long-term financial planning and investment strategy. The home equity borrowing that Michael arranged was presented as a smart financial strategy that would allow us to take advantage of low interest rates and invest in home improvements that would increase our property value. He explained that borrowing against our home equity was a common and responsible way to access capital for investment and improvement projects. Michael handled all of the paperwork and communication with the lending institution, claiming that the process was complicated and that he wanted to ensure that we got the best possible terms and conditions. I was grateful for his expertise and attention to these important financial decisions. The insurance policy changes that Michael made were explained as updates and improvements to our coverage that would provide better protection for our family at lower costs. He would talk about shopping for better rates and coverage options that would save us money while providing superior benefits. Michael would handle all of the communication with insurance companies and would present me with documents that showed our new policies and coverage levels. I trusted that he was making decisions that would protect our family's interests and provide the security we needed. The business partnership and investment opportunities that Michael began pursuing were presented as exciting chances to increase our income and build additional wealth for our family's future. He would talk about potential business ventures and investment opportunities that could significantly improve our financial situation. Michael would often need to invest money upfront to participate in these business opportunities, claiming that the initial investment would be returned with significant profits within a relatively short period. These investments seemed like reasonable risks given the potential returns and Michael's confidence in the opportunities. The lifestyle inflation that began to occur in our household was gradual and seemed like natural improvements to our standard of living as Michael's income supposedly increased. We began eating at more expensive restaurants, buying higher quality groceries, and purchasing luxury items that we had previously considered unnecessary. Michael would encourage these lifestyle improvements, saying that we had worked hard and deserved to enjoy the benefits of our financial success. He would suggest that we should take advantage of our improved financial situation to provide better experiences and opportunities for our children. The children's activity and education expenses that Michael encouraged were presented as investments in their development and future success. He would suggest expensive summer camps, private tutoring, and specialized programs that would give our children advantages and opportunities that would benefit them throughout their lives. These educational investments seemed like responsible parenting decisions that would help our children achieve their potential and prepare for successful futures. Michael's willingness to spend money on the children's development seemed like evidence of his commitment to being a good father and provider. The family vacation planning that Michael began suggesting was more elaborate and expensive than our previous travel experiences. He would propose trips to exotic destinations and luxury resorts, claiming that we could afford these experiences because of his improved income and our careful financial planning. These family vacations were wonderful experiences that created precious memories for our children and seemed like evidence of our family's financial success and Michael's generosity as a husband and father. I was grateful for his willingness to prioritize family experiences and create special opportunities for our children. The home improvement projects that Michael suggested and funded were presented as necessary maintenance and valuable investments in our property. He would talk about the importance of maintaining our home's value and creating a comfortable living environment for our family. These home improvements were beautiful and functional additions to our living space that seemed like evidence of Michael's commitment to our family's comfort and our property's long-term value. I was proud of the improvements we were making and grateful for Michael's vision and investment in our home. The social and entertainment expenses that Michael began incurring were explained as necessary for maintaining business relationships and community connections that were important for his career advancement. He would talk about the importance of networking and relationship building in his professional field. Michael would often host business dinners and entertainment events that seemed expensive but appeared to be investments in his career and our family's financial future. These events were opportunities for me to meet Michael's colleagues and clients, and they seemed like evidence of his professional success and social standing. The charitable giving and community involvement that Michael began pursuing were presented as important social responsibilities and opportunities to give back to our community now that we were financially successful. He would talk about the importance of supporting causes we cared about and being good community citizens. These charitable activities seemed like evidence of Michael's good character and our family's values, and I was proud of our ability to support important causes and make a positive difference in our community. The charitable giving seemed like a natural result of our financial success and social responsibility. The financial education and planning resources that Michael began investing in were presented as important tools for managing our wealth and ensuring our family's long-term financial security. He would talk about the importance of staying informed about financial strategies and investment opportunities. Michael would attend expensive financial seminars and purchase costly financial planning resources, claiming that the education and information he gained would help him make better decisions about our family's money and investments. These expenses seemed like reasonable investments in our financial future. The technology and equipment purchases that Michael began making were explained as necessary tools for his work and for managing our family's increasingly complex financial situation. He would buy expensive computers, software, and communication devices that he claimed were essential for his professional responsibilities. These technology purchases seemed like reasonable business expenses that would help Michael be more productive and successful in his work. I was supportive of his efforts to stay current with technology and to have the tools he needed to excel in his career. The subscription services and membership fees that Michael began paying for were presented as valuable resources for business networking, financial planning, and personal development. He would talk about the importance of staying connected with professional organizations and having access to premium services and information. These memberships and subscriptions seemed like reasonable investments in Michael's professional development and our family's access to valuable resources and opportunities. I was impressed by his commitment to continuous learning and professional growth. The consulting and professional services that Michael began hiring were explained as necessary support for managing our complex financial situation and business opportunities. He would talk about the importance of having expert advice and professional assistance for important financial decisions. These professional services seemed like evidence of Michael's responsible approach to financial management and his commitment to making informed decisions about our family's money. I was grateful for his attention to detail and his willingness to invest in expert guidance. The gradual realization that our family's financial situation was deteriorating despite Michael's supposed income increases and business success was confusing and frightening. The disconnect between Michael's claims about our financial prosperity and the reality of our increasing money problems created cognitive dissonance that was difficult to resolve. I began to suspect that something was seriously wrong with our finances when basic household expenses became difficult to cover despite Michael's assurances that his income was higher than ever. The contradiction between his claims about our financial success and our actual ability to pay bills was becoming impossible to ignore. The investigation that led to discovering Michael's affair was initially focused on understanding our family's financial problems rather than suspecting infidelity. I was trying to figure out where our money was going and why we were struggling financially when Michael claimed that his income and our investments were performing well. The financial records that revealed Michael's affair spending were shocking not only because of the amounts involved, but because of the systematic nature of the deception. This wasn't occasional overspending or poor financial judgment. It was deliberate and ongoing theft from our family's resources to fund another relationship. The emotional impact of learning that our children had been deprived of opportunities and security so that Michael could impress his mistress was devastating and lasting. The knowledge that Victoria had been living in luxury while our children wore second-hand clothes and ate generic food was heartbreaking and infuriating. The legal consequences of Michael's financial betrayal extended beyond our divorce to include potential criminal charges for fraud and theft. The systematic nature of his financial deception and the amounts involved made his behavior potentially criminal rather than just unethical. The recovery process has been long and difficult, but our family has learned valuable lessons about resilience, adaptability, and finding happiness in relationships and experiences rather than material possessions. The children have developed strength and character that will serve them well throughout their lives. The new financial management system that I've developed for our family is based on transparency, careful planning, and protection of our resources. I've learned to be vigilant about our financial security and to maintain control over decisions that affect our family's welfare. The specific details of how Michael's affair spending escalated over time reveal a pattern of financial betrayal that became increasingly bold and reckless as his relationship with Victoria deepened. What started as occasional expensive dinners evolved into a complete financial lifestyle that rivaled or exceeded our own family's standard of living. During the first year of the affair, Michael's spending on Victoria was relatively modest but consistent. He would spend approximately $2,000 to $3,000 per month on dinners, gifts, and entertainment for their relationship. While this amount was significant, it wasn't enough to create obvious financial problems for our family given Michael's income at the time. The second year of the affair saw a dramatic escalation in Michael's spending as Victoria's expectations increased and their relationship became more serious. Michael began spending $5,000 to $8,000 per month on Victoria, including regular expensive gifts, weekend trips, and the beginning of his financial support for her living expenses. During this period, Michael rented the luxury apartment for Victoria and began paying her monthly expenses in addition to continuing to buy her gifts and fund their entertainment activities. The combination of rent, utilities, and lifestyle support for Victoria was costing our family more than our own household budget. The third year of the affair was when Michael's spending became completely out of control and began to threaten our family's financial survival. He was spending $10,000 to $15,000 per month on Victoria, including the apartment rent, car payments, luxury gifts, expensive vacations, and even her graduate school tuition. The credit card statements from this period showed purchases that were shocking in their extravagance and frequency. Michael had bought Victoria diamond jewelry worth $20,000, designer handbags costing several $1,000s each, and luxury electronics that exceeded what we had ever purchased for our entire family. The vacation expenses during the final year of the affair were particularly outrageous. Michael had taken Victoria on trips to Paris, Italy, and the Caribbean, staying in five-star hotels and dining at Michelin-starred restaurants. A single vacation with Victoria would cost more than our family's entire annual vacation budget. The car that Michael purchased for Victoria was a luxury sedan that cost $60,000, more than we had ever spent on a family vehicle. While our children were riding in a used minivan that needed repairs we couldn't afford, Victoria was driving a brand new car that Michael had bought for her with our family's money. The apartment that Michael had rented for Victoria was in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the city, with monthly rent that exceeded our own mortgage payment. The furniture and decorating that he had paid for in that apartment was more expensive than everything in our family home combined. The monthly financial support that Michael was providing to Victoria included not only her rent and car payments, but also her grocery bills, clothing allowances, entertainment expenses, and even her gym membership and spa treatments. He was essentially funding her entire lifestyle while our own family was beginning to struggle with basic expenses. The educational expenses that Michael was covering for Victoria included her graduate school tuition, textbooks, and living expenses while she pursued her degree. The amount he was spending on her education was more than we had saved for all three of our children's college funds combined. The business investments that Michael claimed to be making were actually gifts and loans to Victoria that she was using to start her own consulting business. Michael had provided her with startup capital, office equipment, and ongoing financial support for a business venture that had no connection to our family's financial interests. The insurance policies that Michael had purchased for Victoria included health insurance, life insurance, and even disability coverage that protected her financial security, while leaving our own family's insurance coverage unchanged and potentially inadequate. The legal and professional services that Michael had hired for Victoria included attorneys, accountants, and business consultants who were helping her with various personal and professional matters. These services were being paid for with our family's money, while our own legal and financial needs were being neglected. The timeline of our family's financial decline corresponded exactly with the escalation of Michael's spending on Victoria. As his affair expenses increased, our family's financial security decreased proportionally. The money that should have been protecting our children's futures was being spent on impressing and supporting his mistress. The college savings accounts that Michael had been systematically draining were supposed to provide educational opportunities for Sophie, Jake, and Emma. The money that had been carefully saved over years of contributions and investment growth was spent on Victoria's immediate gratification and luxury lifestyle. Sophie's college fund, which had contained over $40,000, was completely depleted to pay for Victoria's apartment deposit, furniture, and first year's rent. Jake's education savings, which had grown to $35,000, was spent on the luxury car that Michael bought for Victoria. Emma's college fund, which had been the smallest but was growing steadily, was used to pay for Victoria's graduate school tuition and educational expenses. The irony of using our daughter's education fund to pay for Michael's mistress's education was particularly cruel and devastating. The retirement accounts that Michael had liquidated were supposed to provide security for our old age and ensure that we wouldn't be a financial burden on our children when we could no longer work. The penalties and taxes associated with early withdrawal of these funds created additional financial damage beyond the loss of the principal amounts. The home equity that Michael had borrowed against was supposed to be our family's primary financial asset and source of security. The loans he had taken against our home's value put our family's housing stability at risk and created debt obligations that we couldn't meet on our reduced income. The credit damage that resulted from Michael's affair spending affected our family's ability to secure housing, employment, and financial services for years to come. The missed payments and defaulted accounts that resulted from his financial betrayal destroyed our credit ratings and made it difficult to rebuild our financial stability. The bankruptcy proceedings that became necessary to address Michael's debt were humiliating and devastating for our entire family. The legal process required us to disclose all of our financial information and submit to court supervision of our spending and income. The children were old enough to understand that bankruptcy meant that our family had failed financially and that we would be subject to legal restrictions and social stigma as a result. The shame and embarrassment of bankruptcy affected their self-esteem and their relationships with friends and classmates. The asset liquidation that was required during the bankruptcy process meant that our family lost not only our home, but also many personal possessions and family heirlooms that had sentimental value beyond their financial worth. The children had to give up toys, books, and personal items that held precious memories. The housing instability that resulted from losing our family home was particularly traumatic for the children. They had to leave the bedrooms they had grown up in, the neighborhood they had known all their lives, and the school district where they had established friendships and academic records. The apartment we moved to was significantly smaller and less comfortable than our family home. The children had to share bedrooms and give up many of their possessions because we couldn't afford to move everything and didn't have space for all of our belongings. The school transitions were difficult for all three children as they had to adjust to new schools, new teachers, and new social environments while processing the trauma of their parents' divorce and their family's financial collapse. Their academic performance suffered as they struggled to adapt to multiple major changes simultaneously. The social stigma associated with bankruptcy and financial failure affected our family's relationships with friends and community members. People who had been close to us during our prosperous years became distant and uncomfortable when our circumstances changed dramatically. The children lost friendships and social opportunities because we could no longer afford to participate in activities and events that had been important parts of their social lives. Birthday parties, sports teams, and social clubs became luxuries that we couldn't afford rather than normal parts of childhood. The emotional counseling that became necessary to help our family cope with the trauma of Michael's betrayal was expensive and difficult to afford given our destroyed financial situation. The children needed therapy to process their father's abandonment and the loss of their financial security, but therapy costs were a significant burden on our already strained budget. The legal fees associated with the divorce and bankruptcy proceedings were enormous and created additional financial stress during an already difficult time. The cost of protecting our family's interests and securing our future was money that we didn't have and couldn't afford to spend. The work schedule changes that became necessary for me to support our family were dramatic and challenging. I had to take on multiple jobs and work significantly more hours than I had during our marriage, which meant less time available for the children when they needed support and stability most. The childcare arrangements that became necessary because of my increased work schedule were expensive and difficult to coordinate. The children had to adjust to new caregivers and different routines while I worked to earn enough money to support our basic needs. The transportation challenges that resulted from our changed financial circumstances affected every aspect of our daily lives. We had to rely on public transportation and walking rather than having reliable access to a car, which made work, school, and daily activities more difficult and time-consuming. The food insecurity that our family experienced during the worst periods of our financial crisis was something I had never imagined we would face. There were times when I had to choose between paying utility bills and buying groceries, and when I had to rely on food banks and community assistance to feed my children. The clothing and personal item shortages that resulted from our financial constraints meant that the children had to wear clothes that didn't fit properly, use school supplies that were worn out, and go without personal items that their classmates took for granted. The medical and dental care that we had to postpone or eliminate because of cost concerns affected our family's health and well-being. Routine checkups, dental cleanings, and necessary medical treatments became luxuries that we couldn't afford rather than basic healthcare needs. The educational opportunities that the children had to give up because of our financial situation included tutoring, test preparation, college visits, and extracurricular activities that would have enhanced their academic and personal development. The birthday and holiday celebrations that we had to scale back or eliminate were particularly difficult for the children to understand and accept. Special occasions that had previously been sources of joy and family celebration became reminders of our financial limitations and changed circumstances. The family traditions and activities that we could no longer afford created ongoing grief and loss for all of us. Movie nights, restaurant dinners, and weekend outings that had been regular parts of our family life became impossible luxuries that we could only remember rather than continue to enjoy. The community resources that became necessary for our family survival were helpful but humbling. Learning to access food banks and financial assistance required swallowing pride and accepting help I had never expected to need. Finding jobs that paid enough to support our family while providing flexibility for the children's needs required creativity and persistence. The career rebuilding process has been challenging as I've developed new skills and rebuilt my professional reputation. The employment gap made it difficult to secure well-paying positions. The financial recovery process has required learning new skills in budgeting and debt management. Rebuilding our stability while supporting 3 children has been challenging. The credit repair process has been complex as I've worked to address the damage and establish independent credit history. The bankruptcy created obstacles that will affect our family's financial options for years. The recovery process has been challenging, but has taught our family valuable lessons about resilience and finding happiness in relationships rather than material possessions. The children have developed strength and character through this experience. The lessons I've learned about financial protection are valuable. I now understand the importance of maintaining awareness of family finances and recognize warning signs like unexplained spending changes, secretiveness about financial documents, and inconsistencies in money explanations. Spouses should have access to information about major financial decisions and be aware of the family's overall financial situation. Financial betrayal can be just as devastating as emotional betrayal and requires the same vigilance and protection. You deserve honest financial relationships that honor your worth and protect your family's security. Don't let anyone convince you that you should sacrifice your family's financial well-being for someone else's benefit.